and it's 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening for our webinar. Our plan is to take about 60 to 70, maybe 80 minutes. So we're hoping to get close to the hour with this. So thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate you again coming. My name is Wendy Jobs, and I am the manager of dental hygiene practice. And Jazz Chahal, I'll let him introduce himself, but we're your moderators and presenters for the webinar this evening. And I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize all of the traditional territories upon which dental hygienists work. So go ahead, Jazz, if you want to say hi and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jazz Chahal. I am Wendy's co-practice advisor at the BCDHA, and excited to be talking to you guys about the wages and employment situation in BC.
Thanks, Jazz. Some of you might know me, some of you may not. I've been with the association for several years. I'm manager of dental hygiene practice. As Jazz mentioned, there's 3 practice advisors on the team. So Shannon, Jazz, and myself do most of the advising when it comes to practice issues. So yeah, we're really excited to bring this webinar to you this evening. So let's rock and roll. If you have any questions, you can certainly send us an email, info@bcdha.com. There's a phone number there as well. If you're having audio troubles, you can phone in. This is an interesting slide. Since Jazz and I are presenters, hopefully we won't say anything that's not appropriate. And I think BCDHA supports what we're going to say here tonight, but we usually include this slide in all our presentations. For those of you that are new to Teams, if you have a look, usually if you move your mouse around, you can see the little toolbar up here. You can access the chat. You can also, so I'm going to change slides here. You can access the chat this way, just click right there. You can also have a look here. If you hit these little bubbles here, you can come down, you can have a gallery, you can change the view in which you see it, because sometimes the PowerPoint might be small and we're big, or vice versa. So you can change how it looks on your screen there, depending on which device you're working on. With this being an employment webinar, reviewing wages and benefits and stuff, there will be no continuing competency that would be expected to be claimed with the college. So just aware. And at the end of this webinar, we will be emailing you a survey, a link to a survey. Just click on it. It should take you less than a minute. We really appreciate your feedback, and your feedback really helps us plan for meaningful and relevant opportunity events for you guys. So please fill out our survey. We really appreciate it. So how will our webinar work? We've got 4 webinar objectives for you this evening. We're going to cover the first 3, Jazz and myself, and then we're going to have a bit of a question and answer Q&A for the 4th objective. And we have hopefully a surprise guest coming. So I don't think he's in yet, but we'll see him later. So we'll introduce you when he arrives. So anything else, Jazz, or can we get started?
I say we get started.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Carry on.
All right. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, as you guys know, we did the wage survey back in the winter in December, and the results came out in January. So today we're kind of going to dive into those results a bit and also talk about some issues we hear about from hygienists a lot here on the practice support team, emails we get, and we're going to talk about how to, sorry about that, how to talk to your employer about, you know, possibly negotiating a wage increase or benefits increase, and also talk about some of the general employment landscape in the province post COVID. So yeah, so we'll get started with that. And you can go to the next slide, Wendy, if you can.
Jazz, I've lost. Do you want me to forward?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. And so, yeah, so this is one of the comments we got on our Facebook page this month. And it was, we've had quite a few comments like this from individuals. Hold on, we're hearing, there's a constant beeping in the background. Make sure everyone's muted.
I'll go through and see if I can find anybody
Yeah,
who's not.
yeah. So anytime somebody does join the webinar, you hear a little beep beep. So yeah, that's just something to alert that more people are joining. Sorry about that. It does get a little annoying. So yeah, this is a comment that we got. It was just thanking us for our wage survey. You know, somebody who was recently able to confidently request a fair wage as a new hire because they could provide their employer with information and like specific information to their region. And they've said that it was a great member benefit. So hearing this kind of positive feedback just, you know, really encourages us to continue doing the wage survey, and we're hoping to make it an annual wage survey instead of a biannual. And yeah, like we're super happy to provide whatever member benefits we can, especially things that are in high demand, such as the wage survey. So thank you for supporting us and participating as well. And you can go to the next slide. All right, so
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
there's a little bit of a delay. Yeah, that's okay. There's a little bit of delay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll try and anticipate and go a little bit before you need it. Sorry about that.
No problem. So as we all know, there's a plethora of jobs available in the province right now. So if you just take a peek at the CDHA job board, you can see that BC tops the list with 114 listings. This was from a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, we're still at the top. And you can compare that to Ontario with 72 listings. But population-wise, BC actually, we're a much smaller province than Ontario, but we have a significantly more amount of job openings. So yeah, the sky is raining jobs, and that's just another reason why we want to empower hygienists with information about the employment landscape. And later on, we'll talk about wage. But you know, Wendy always says knowledge is power, and the more knowledge you can approach your employer with, the more confident you are and the better chances you have of negotiating a wage increase and being paid your worth. So as of February 2022, so last month, CDHA, BCDHA job board, there's 99 listings for BC. BCDA also has a job board with 29 listings. And Castanet, which is another, it's more of a regional job board, I think, for the interior. They have 10 listings. So yep, there's quite a few openings. And oh, somebody says can't see the slides. Okay, it's okay now. Great. So yeah, so you know, there's a lot of job openings, and we want to talk about how we can use that to our advantage in negotiating higher wages, because we are obviously in high demand. So Wendy, you can head to the next slide.
There's a delay, guys. I'm clicking the slides, but obviously there's a bit of a delay there before Jazz sees them.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. I can just start talking. So yeah, so that goes hand in hand with what I just mentioned of using data to identify if your salary is on par with your colleagues. And that's basically the whole reason we do the wage survey. So we're going to kind of jump into the wage survey results right now and go over some of the results that you guys might have seen in our summary that's posted on our website. And then I'm also going to go into some deeper details that actually weren't included in the summary of results. So just to explain the landscape a little bit better. So like I mentioned, the survey was completed in December 2021. Results were released the next month. And we actually had a phenomenal response from our members. We had 1,843 members participate. So that's around 45% of the membership. So I see that people are saying they can't see the slides. I think there's a little bit of a delay before the slide comes up. So if you can just hang with us. I'm just going to check one thing here quickly.
Jazz, if you want, you could pull up the slide and share it if you wanted to share, because we've got the same slides, if that's easier.
Yeah, I think I might just do that.
Because I'm sorry, I'm clicking and.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. So just hang tight here while I.
Sorry, guys, technical difficulties here.
Yeah.
Even though we've practiced this, it doesn't always go as seamless as we'd like it to be.
So we'll share and we'll share this one. So
yeah,
okay, just
thanks,
perfect. If Wendy, you can monitor the chat because I can't see it anymore, and just let me know if there's any issues. So yeah, like I mentioned, we had a 45% response rate from our membership, which is for any survey, that's actually quite spectacular. So thank you so much for showing support and coming out and giving us such a large data set. And by doing that, you're also supporting your colleagues because it just makes our survey that much stronger. So with that number of response, our margin of error was 2%. And just to quickly gloss over a couple of details here, clinical practice obviously was the most popular practice setting with 93.5%. And hourly wage was the most popular wage structure. So 94% of our members had hourly wage as their wage structure. So, but talking about wage structure, it can differ. We do know of hygienists that work on commission, that work on salary, or that also work on a combination of the above. So what we did for our wage survey was did the best we could with all those different situations to break it down into an hourly rate because that was the most popular, so that it was kind of an even playing field to compare apples to apples. So this might look familiar to a few of you. It is part of the summary of results. These are just like the wage tables that we produce for our wage survey, breaking each region down. So we have a regional average, and then we also do our best to break it down by cities. There's a couple of cities you'll see they do have little asterisks next to them. That just means that the data set was a little bit smaller. So that means less than 5 responses for those cities or towns. So you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. And just moving along different regions of our province. And these were the final 2. So that was from the largest response was from the Greater Vancouver region, and the smallest sample size was from the Kootenay region with 4% of our respondents from there. So we're going to talk a little bit about locum wages, so temping wages. We did have some emails about this to include this in the wage survey, and we also had some people reach out to talk about it in this webinar. So I compared the average hourly locum wage by region, just because overall, 25% of our respondents said that they do engage in temporary work or locum work. And so it just made more sense to kind of do it by region, because once you break it down by city, it's just too small. There's only a few per city sometimes. So as we all know, as hygienists, the locum wage usually is a little bit more than the average hourly wage you might get for a permanent position. And that's what we saw in our survey. So for every region, it varied about how much more it was. In some cases, it was a couple of percent more than the average hourly wage. But in other cases, it was up to 8% more per hour if you're temping versus having a permanent position. So that was something we all usually know of, but it was interesting to see it reflected in our hard data. So yeah. And provincially, our average is $49.99. So all of BC, Wendy and I were chatting. It would have been nice if there was an extra penny in there and made it around 50, but maybe next year. So, and then the provincial average for locum temp wages was $53.65. So a bit higher there. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about wage ranges by each region. So this is not the locum wage anymore. This kind of is touching on the tables from before. So if you're not familiar with these plots, I didn't include them in the summary of the wage survey. They're called box and whisker plots. So if you look at the orange boxes in the middle, that orange box is a range of wage that actually reflects 50% of the responses. So half of the responses from the Cariboo Northern BC region had a wage range from $45 to $50. So that's the box. the line in the middle is the median. So that's the middle number. So if you take the highest number and the lowest number, the number in the middle is this this black number. So it's this black line. So it's different from the average. It's just the middle number. And so yeah, we got the middle number, and the orange box is the 50% range in the middle. And then we have two whiskers. So there's a whisker on the left and then there's a whisker on the right. So the whisker on the left is 25%. So the lower 25% roughly. And the whisker on the right here is the upper 25%. So we can see that 25% of people from Cariboo and Northern BC have a wage range from $40 to $45. And then 50% of people have it from $45 to $50. And then the final 25%, to round up to 100%, have a wage range from $50 to $55. So that kind of explains what these graphs mean. So the reason we show this, or I am showing this, is because it's one thing to just look at an average wage and see where you stand. But I mean, it's hard to have everybody on the same wage or know what the average actually means without looking at the range. So once you see these orange boxes, if you fall into the orange box, you know, okay, I'm in line with, you know, half of the hygienists in my area. So in Fraser Valley, it seems to be about 48 to 52 perhaps. And then if your wage is higher than 52, you're like, then you know, okay, I'm actually in the top 25% of hygienists in the Fraser Valley. So that's just one way I thought it would be nice to break down the survey results, just because, yeah, we always hear people saying, oh, the average in for example, for Vancouver Island was $48. And I know people who are getting paid 53, 54. So if you look at Vancouver Island, where I'm from, you can see that there are people who are getting paid 53, 54, 55. And of course, there are people who are getting paid more, but I did take out the outliers just to make it a little bit cleaner. And just a reminder that this is only clinical dental hygienists working in dental offices, not running their own clinic as independent hygienists. So those numbers are a little bit different, so we didn't include them. And moving to the next slide. So wage increases, circling back to the reason we're all here today. So one of the questions on the survey was, have you had a wage increase since March 2019? So March 2019 is when we had our first, I guess, the COVID lockdown, the big one, and we all stopped working. And right after that, when everybody came back to work, the tide was kind of changing, and we were starting to hear a little bit more, okay, this person's getting this much. Oh, the wages seem to have gone up because people have retired or not come back. So I thought it would be a good idea to ask if there's how many people have had a wage increase since then. And it was pretty, shocking to see that over a third of our members actually had not had a wage increase since that time. And despite hearing that, okay, wages have generally gone up. So taking that 1/3, I wanted to see how that really stacks up from region to region. So what I did was I created this graph here that compares the 2019 survey, so the last time the survey was done, to the 2021 survey. So comparing those 2 years, you can see that wages, so the blue line here is 2019 and the orange line is 2021. For every region, the wage has gone up quite a bit. So to see this graph and consider that a third of our members who responded actually didn't get a wage increase, this orange line should be longer, because that orange gap between the blue and the orange only represents 2/3 of our members. The rest of them stayed the same. So that's why we do the survey, to see this data, see what's going on, and empower that 34% that might not be being paid their worth to approach their employer with data. And we'll talk to Wendy's going to talk a little bit more about that and what kind of things we can bring to our employers to actually show our worth in a concrete manner. And let's go next slide here. So this, looking at 34% of our members who hadn't had a wage increase, I wanted to see if there was any trends with age. So I broke it down. So we're going to focus more on the blue line here because that's the individuals who had not had a wage increase. So I broke it down by years of experience. So new to practice graduates or new to practice or new graduates from 0 to 5 years of experience, 37.8%, you can say 38% of them didn't get a wage increase since 2019. And I guess we can chalk that up to not having experience or not knowing how to approach our employer and what kind of information to bring to the table. And having, graduated from hygiene, what I think 5 years ago now myself, yeah, when I was a couple of years into practice, I didn't know or didn't have the confidence to approach my employer. So yeah, we're here to empower our new hygienists as well. And then I thought it was really interesting looking at the trend line here. You can see as we get higher and higher years of experience from 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and then 25 up, we can see that a proportion of individuals who didn't get a wage increase increases as well. So that was really interesting for me to see. And having worked with some hygienists that were more experienced, perhaps just thinking about it, like perhaps it could be that when you're comfortable in an office, you don't want to kind of rock the boat or whatever it may be. But I think that regardless of how comfortable you are in an office, you should be paid your worth. And to see that 41 or 42% of our hygienists with over 25 years of experience aren't getting wage increases, that's pretty surprising, and we want to change that. So we're going to talk, Wendy's going to talk, like I mentioned, a little bit more about what kind of information to bring up with your employer. So I'm going to pass it over to Wendy here, who's going to chat a little bit about the 2021 CDHA survey. And do you want to share your slide or share your screen now?
It's working. Let's just leave it like this. I don't want to have a delay for everybody else if we're switching back and forth. So that's fine. We'll switch it up and you can advance the slides.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jazz, for that. I really, my son has an economics degree, and I asked him a year or so ago, I said, which is going to be more valuable, oil or water in the future? And he said, neither. It's going to be information. Information is really what gives people the power to get out and advocate and, say to your employer, this is what I really think I'm worth. And so in terms of having the data set, that's really, really important for the association, for us to look at these trends, how things are going over time, as well as for you as individuals in your individual employment settings. And, unfortunately, I don't think it's just new graduates who are having trouble. I noticed there was a conversation earlier about, people saying to get up the nerve to ask for a raise, and those skills can be learned. There's something that you can improve in terms of your own abilities and skill sets. So that's what we're doing here, is helping to give you some information to help you. So keep in mind our surveys, I think we're going to start doing them every year, which will give us some different information. Every second year, CDHA does their job market and employment survey. So the next few slides will blend either our survey and their data so that we can give you kind of a fulsome picture. So next slide, Jazz. Right, sorry, I have too many screens open. Okay, so I saw a chat earlier there, or a comment earlier, as people were asking about other benefits other than salary, because it is the whole package. You really have to think about what does your work home provide for you. And so if we look over time here from 2013 to 2021, we see that most hygienists work more than 30 hours per week, and that has been declining. The hourly rate, Jazz already kind of commented about that, about increases versus no wage increases. And this is a really good statistics for us, and this is a really good trend that we're seeing in the data, is telling us that more hygienists each year, or at least every second year, are receiving, more and more people are having their employment contracts in writing. And that's it. If you do not have an employment contract in your employment setting, you still have an employment contract with your employer. It just doesn't happen to be in writing. Of course, things in writing are easier to enforce, but just because you don't have something in writing doesn't mean that you don't have an employment contract. And more people are having their employment contracts in writing. So that's a good sign. and receive a performance review. We're starting to see an upwards trend in that particular data point, which I think is really important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the last objective about how best to kind of advocate for yourself in your employment setting. So we find that the most common benefits outside of wage are dental care, professional development sitting at about 50%, and uniform allowance is just over 50 as well. One of the interesting things that we did in our most recent survey that we haven't done in the past was to ask members who were interested in having some type of extended health benefit plan. I know lots of members have things probably because a spouse or a partner has some type of extended health benefits, but essentially looking at what do our members have access to as dental hygienists. So the association is looking into possibly having some type of benefit package that we could purchase as members of BCDHA. So we'll bring you more information as that develops. This isn't, did you insert this? Sorry, Jess, I don't know that one. No, go back to the dinosaur one.
Sorry, I inserted this and I forgot to move it, but yeah.
Surprised me. Do you want to talk to this one then?
Yeah, so yeah, just like what Wendy mentioned is, yeah, we did ask our members about health benefits, and we just wanted to see what do our members get, because when we talk about wage, benefits do come up, like what's $50 an hour like without benefits compared to, I don't know, 47 an hour with benefits. So we just wanted to see what kind of benefits our hygienist members are getting and what are those worth, so it's kind of easier to understand. And I think that it's telling that dental benefits are the most popular because the dentist will just write off whatever they do for free, and then comes like the more basic stuff like uniform allowances, and then conferences like once or twice every year or every other year, and then CE. But then health benefits, which should be up here with dental, are actually at like 34%. So only a third of members have health benefits. So yeah, that's like what Wendy said. We are trying to see what we can do for our members, because of the people who don't have benefits, I think it was like 60-something% do want benefits. So we hear you, and we are working on it.
Thanks, Jess.
So, yeah.
You did a much better job covering that slide than I would have, that's for sure. So here I put this slide up because I being the oldest hygienist on the BCDHA team, I'm going to take you down a walk through memory lane. So we'll just next slide there, Jazz. Oops, a little bit too far. There we go. So let's kind of unpack this slide. There's a lot of numbers here, but and sorry, since I don't have the slides, I can't point, so I can do this, but you won't know what I'm pointing at. So I'll just have to try to articulate it. This is just a snapshot of looking at a few areas throughout the province. And so we do have the average wage in each of those areas. And you can kind of see from 2009, and I've circled the 2009 average wage and the 2021 average wage, and it's obviously gone up a significant amount. There's also a long time between 2009 and 2021. I think the next slide, does that have the, sorry, I can't see the, yeah, there we go. So if we look at the increase from 2019 to 2009, which is a 10-year gap, we see that the wages only went up. The average hourly wage for hygienists in the province was only a 5% increase, which if you take into account the cost of living, that's actually a decline or a decrease in the purchasing power of your wages. So that's a very, I'll call it a frightening trend that we saw last year, or sorry, for the last 10 years. And then next slide, Jazz. And then if we compare, there was a huge jump in terms of the hourly wage for the province between last year and this year. And so we've seen a 14% increase in the 12 years. So we did have, what you'll see is kind of a bit of a market correction, I think, what's happening there, which might seem like a big jump. If you look at 2019 to 2021, from $46 to $49, or almost $50, that seems like a big jump, except if you go back in time and compare that to 10 or 12 years ago, it's really not that big of an increase. It's just slightly over 1% per year. And we know that, like, for instance, inflation this past year has been up around 4 to 5%, and possibly again the same next year. So it's very concerning when we see trends like this. So we really want to keep our eye kind of on the ball as to what's happening in this case. Next slide, please. And again, I'll remind everybody that we do have, we'll send out these PowerPoints, so you don't have to be busy writing down numbers and stuff. So we'll send around our handouts. So a little bit, I think I did a glance at the slides, or sorry, the comments there about, what's the fee guide been doing. So we're just gonna kind of burrow into the BCDA, so the British Columbia Dental Association fee guide, and look at their debridement scaling codes and what those numbers, what those fees have been doing over the years. So you can see that obviously from 1992 up to this year, there's been a significant increase. Next slide. We saw, again, back in 2017 to 2018, we saw a huge increase in especially some line items in the fee guide. So there's a 14% increase for scaling units between 2017 and 2018. And then we've seen kind of more moderate incremental jumps in that particular fee code. And this will become apparent why I'm kind of picking on scaling units. Next slide. So again, this is a fairly big slide. I want to unpack it a little bit for you. So if we look back, the year 1992, which actually I graduated in 91, and there was no, I couldn't find the actual scaling fee code for 91 and 93. I could find it for 92. So Jez on the right-hand side there for $30.33. Oh, sorry, go back a slide just a sec here. Yeah, there we go. Just in the 1992, yeah, right in there. So we can see that the average hourly wage in 91 and 93 was $30 and $33 respectively, compared to a unit of scaling of $21.90. Now, for your young and hygienists out there, you may not know that way back when in the dinosaur ages, when I was an infant dental hygienist, there was a huge difference in the fee for scaling versus root planing. In somewhere around the 94, 95, 96 era, that then the British Columbia Dental Association collapsed the fees to be the same going forward. I don't have a lot of data in that time period, but we just kind of jump forward, and then we can see in 2009, a unit of scaling was $30.50. And then in, sorry, somebody's covering up the slide there. A unit of root planing was $30.50, and then they were the same going forward. So next slide, Jazz, if you want to kind of jump forward, and then I can kind of talk about. So if we jump forward to 2021, we can see that the average age of $49.99 for our salary or our hourly wage in BC, compared to a unit of scaling in the BCDA fee guide is $48. That's only a 4% difference. If we go back to the early 2000s, 2009, we can see that there was a 44% difference between a unit of scaling and what an average hourly wage was in BC. And just let everybody kind of stop and think about this. So what that means is that if we think back to those previous few slides where our average salary wasn't really keeping up with the rest of the world in terms of inflation, yet we've seen some fairly significant increases in the preventive fees that a dental practice is making. You can certainly see that there's a little bit more profit being made on the backs of the dental hygienists who are making a fairly significant financial contribution to a practice. I wish we could have a big old conversation about this, but we can't. In order to take some of this information forward, and so what are you going to do with this information? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So if you can go to the next slide there, Jazz. So what I want to do is talk a little bit. One of the things that when we hear from hygienists and stories like this are not completely unfamiliar to us is somebody will have been working in the same practice for the last, say 10 or 15 years. And they call us and we're chatting about their employment situation, and they'll say, I haven't had a raise in 10 years or 15 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Have you asked for a raise, or have you gone to your employer? What kind of conversations are you having? And they may or may not have been having those conversations. So one of the other things that I do is, I mean, I'm a dental hygienist. The practice advisors are dental hygienists. We all know that your contribution to an office is much greater, than your financial contribution. However, as we've seen in the chat, when we can take data and numbers and information to our employers, we can better articulate our value in a financial aspect. It's really hard to financially put numbers on those other parts of the value. So that's why we're really kind of focused in on the data that we have in terms of the wage surveys. So how can we operationalize that? Every hygienist who works in clinical practice should be keeping track of your production. Even if it's a general, I don't mean take home notes or anything, but certainly at the end of the day, you should be able to put together and say, at the end of the day, this patient was, I billed out this much in this office, blah, blah, blah. So you can see that we've just kind of giving you a sample there. I've taken some general round numbers. They may or not be accurate for your particular practice. That's why you should keep your own data. Next slide, please. After you've averaged out how much your average hourly production is, and you definitely don't want to do this on 1 day or 2 days. You want to do this over a long period of time, because the more days in which you did calculate your oops, kind of jumping ahead there. Yeah, right there. So the more days that you calculate your average, it will be more accurate in the long run. So if you did it over 5 months, it would be more accurate than if you did it for 2 days versus 2 years versus 5 years. So good to keep an average hourly wage. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the expenses. So let's assume you're making $50 an hour and you work an average of 8 hours a day. Your wages for the day would be $400. 50 times 8 is 400. We're going to assume that the cost to your employer is more than your wages, because they have to make CPP, so Canadian Pension Plan, EI, employment insurance, payments on your salary. So we're going to assume that that's about 15%. So we add that 15% to the 400 of your wages. So it actually costs your employer more than $400 to have you work that day. It costs them $460. Now we also need to encompass or kind of account for the overhead for your practice: sundries, disposables, insurance, light, heat, reception cost, the chair that you're in, the rent that the employer has to pay. And we've calculated that to be about $35 an hour. So if you go $35 an hour, it costs your employer to have you work 8 hours a day. That means $280 a day, in addition to your salary and the cost to have you as an employee, costs your employer. So we add those two numbers together, gives us $740. So we're going to assume that the employer, now you've made $400, you have some taxes taken off, so you bring home a certain percentage of that 400. And Jazz, you're doing an awesome job of moving the mouse around to where I am. So thanks for following. So great. That's wonderful. So the cost to your employer for every day that you work, regardless of what you build, is going to cost them about $740 based on some of those assumptions. So let's fast forward to the next slide. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take your production. What did you produce from those previous examples? It was $1,600 a day you produced. We're going to subtract the expense to the employer for you having worked that day, which is $740. So give in this particular example, gives a net profit for the employer of $860 a day. That's a lot. So let's jump to the next slide. We go a little bit further. I'm going to assume that you're working 48 weeks per year. That's about 4 weeks of holidays, give or take, working 4 days a week. That would give you 192 work days per year. So if you were making $860 per day of profit and you worked 192 days, that would be a net profit to your employer of $165,000 and some change. Now, again, I can't verify, I can't tell you if this is what the numbers are for your actual practice where you work with your employer, but you don't know this unless you start calculating it. So spend some time, try and figure these numbers out. And if you're going to bring something like this of an example to your employer and say, this is kind of the numbers, and they disagree, then say, let's give me your numbers. Let's work off of your numbers. But I think it's really a good idea to be able to articulate your financial contribution to your employer, because that will be one of the reasons why they should be remunerating you with a wage that is reasonable and benefits that are to be expected with your status and education and what you bring to the practice. So I wish we could all have a conversation. I could see your hands, but I can't. So for right now, I'm going to have to trust my team to have some questions for me. So I think you hit the slide a couple more times there, Jazz. I think it's some kind of a bring them all up. That's great. Thank you. You know, some of the things that will impact those cancellations are, did you have a cancellation? Was your day full? Did it snow in the northern part of the province and only 2 patients showed up? Of course, those numbers will be reflective of what's happening in your particular practice. You know, thinking about, is the employer pushing or wanting you to do a prophy and a fluoride for every client? Oral hygiene instruction has a fee, but most offices don't charge it. What happens to that? What happens when you have more than one practitioner? Any of those examples I was using perhaps didn't include things like bite wings or a dental exam. How do you consider your production when you have outside or more than one provider providing those particular services? So those are some of the things that could obviously influence that overall data set that we were kind of using as an example, but it should give you an idea about how to start calculating your financial worth and financial contribution to a dental office, to a dental practice. Okay. I think we can go to the next slide. I'm trying to think of what's next. I think that's the so I just wanted to kind of list a few of the resources that we have for our members. We do have an employment contract guide that we have listed on our website. It's free. You can just download it. It's a PDF. It's fairly long, but it does cover some of the things that you might want to consider having in an employment, in a written employment agreement. If you look on our website, just if you go to resources, the top tab, come down to practice supports, we have, that's where the employment contracts guide is located. There's also all those other things for you. We've got the wage survey summaries. I think we've got last 2019 and 2021 listed there for you, so you can download those summaries so that you can have a look at wages over time. And next slide there, Jess. And just a reminder that CDHA also has a few resources on their website in terms of a healthy work practice. They've got some really good resources on their website, so have a look there if you're also looking for resources. And last but not least, our last objective. So identify strategies that will assist you with approaching your employer for a wage review or an increase in your benefits package. And I'm just looking at Jazz. Do we know if James has arrived yet?
I think he has. I did admit him into the meeting.
Hey, Wendy, it's James. Can you hear me?
There he is. Yeah.
James.
How are you?
Hi.
Okay.
Good. Are you able to turn on your camera, James?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just didn't want to jump in, but
Yeah. Turn it on.
is it working?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I just want to introduce this. This is James Younger. Is that how you pronounce your last name, James?
Yep.
And he is the owner of Temp Stars, and he has graciously provided some corporate sponsorship for this webinar. So thank you, James. We really appreciate it, you and your
You're
team.
really welcome.
And even though I think he's on a later time zone than us, so it must be very, very late where you are.
I had a late night coffee.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, James has spoken to our membership before. I can't remember exactly when that was. And I don't know if it's just recent, but you've started to do podcasting.
Yeah, a little bit. I really I try to take advantage of any opportunity I have to kind of write and speak about the things I care about in the dental job market and the industry and things like that. So yeah, some oral health articles, some podcasts, just speaking with dental association, with graduating dental hygiene classes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, excellent. So we brought James on because we've heard him speak, and I know he's very passionate, and you speak some very honest truths, and you call it like it is. And I think you're very honest and approachable. So thanks for joining our members. So we're on the last objective. If you want to go to that last slide there, Jazz.
Hey, Wendy, can I ask, on my laptop, I look super blurry. Do I look that blurry to everyone?
It's a little bit granular.
Yes.
On that.
I see you blurry, James. This is Afifa speaking.
Oh, hi.
And you do look blurry.
Yeah, that's strange because I've got really fast internet, and I don't know how and why that is. Do you think is it worth me maybe hopping off the meeting and then hopping back in to see if maybe a new connection would help smooth that out?
Sure.
'Cause- yeah.
Yeah. Give that a
Okay.
shot.
Okay, I'll watch for you and let you back in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna hang up right now and I'll jump back in.
Sure,
In the
thanks.
meantime, Wendy, we had a couple of questions about just the production calculation.
Yes.
So one was, how is the overhead cost of $35 obtained? And the other one was, what kind of things did you calculate in the daily production number of $200? Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair questions. To be quite honest, I can't whip out the reference list that I use. That $35 an hour, I used a variety of sources, some of it anecdotal, some of it, the BC Dental Association. I'm not sure how often they do it, but they use it's called RK House. And they produce reports on the cost of doing business in dentistry, so to speak. They're not our reports, but I did happen to have a couple of them at my disposal. So we used some of that data. Some of it was anecdotal from people, like, for example, organizations that value a dental practice, and consultants would say, the X amount of production should be, this much should be wages and things like that. So again, I don't have a list of references to show you, but, and what was the second question? Sorry, Jazz?
The second question was, in calculating daily production numbers, are you including billed exams and radiographs, or was it just kind of like an average estimate?
Yeah, again, fair enough. Again, we don't have data that would say, like we have it in terms of the wage survey. We don't have this is what the average hygienist in Alberta or BC produces. There just is no basis to form those types of data. However, that being said, I did do a little bit of legwork, and I did reach out to some of our members across the province, and that was kind of I'll say it was a conservative number that I received from my sources.
Yeah, okay. And last question before we hop to James here. The $35 overhead, is that just for one hygienist or the entire office?
No, that's per hygienist who's producing at that particular practice. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you,
Great.
Wendy.
Thanks, James. You made it back, but you kind of look about the same to me. Sorry about that.
No, I'm really sorry because I tested my internet speed and everything, and the connection's very strong. So I'm not sure why, but I hope
your audio is good though.
Yeah. Okay. As long as the audio is okay, then I guess that's the main thing. Yeah.
So what our plan was, gang, for everybody that's still listening in, was to talk about, okay, so now you've been armed with some data, you got all these numbers, and you can crunch it, and you can come up with some stuff. And so then how do we go about approaching our employer? How do we talk about these types of conversations? And I know, again, I saw some in the chat when people said, I feel intimidated. It's hard. And I completely agree. It's absolutely hard conversations. They're not easy to have, but we came up with a bit of a list here that we could kind of talk about in terms of things that can perhaps ease that pain and suffering just a little bit. And a few of the things that, and I'm just going to touch on these very briefly, and then I thought maybe Jazz and James and I could kind of talk a little bit about it. Communication, when you do it and how you do it and where you do it is really important. Don't do it at the end of the day when everybody's tired and hungry. Don't do it when the dentist is in the middle of a root canal that's gone sideways and they're probably not going to get a lunch today. So just kind of thinking about your communication and where it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, and carve out some time that would be slotted for a conversation with your employer around remuneration. James, I stole this from you. Owners can't leave.
Right.
Employees don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And the owners of your practice can't leave. And so sometimes when they get frustrated, it can be, like right now in the job market, it can be really hard for a dentist to find a hygienist, and it can be frustrating if people leave. And so it does create some hardships for employers as well. And I'm going to leave the work culture, James, because I really want you to talk to this. I'd really like you to define that for us. Mm-hmm. And rehearsing your script, knowing what you want to say and rehearsing it. Try it out in front of your husband or your wife or your partner or your kids or your sister or your neighbor. this is what I'm trying to say. So practicing what you want to say a few times will sometimes help it feel more natural. The other thing too that I think is really important is include your employer into your daily overall work appraisal. So one of the examples I'm going to use is, let's say, I don't know, your bite wings are not the best. You often overlap the posterior molars. And so rather than waiting for a yearly wage review opportunity, is basically by the time you get to that wage review time, if you have a formal one in your employment setting, is not to be surprised with what they're going to say. You should already know the answer to this question when you say, how's my performance been? So include them. Say things like, I've been really working on my overlapping in my bite wings. I did a tutorial with Janice, the CDA, who's really good at bite wings, or whatever. I read a textbook. I did some work. What do you think? How have my bite wings been, Doc? How have things been lately? Have you seen any improvement? And get their feedback. Maybe you still need some work on that area. Maybe you're doing wonderful. If you're doing wonderful, you want to hear that. If you still have improvements that need to be made, you want to hear that too. So try and work that into your daily communication with your employer, touching base. How are things going? And I'm going to leave this one for James, because I think you did a really good job when you talked about it. So I want to touch base with James first and say, can you define work culture for us?
Sure. And thanks again for having me part of this. I was really excited to be able to speak to everybody and kind of give my thoughts on it. So I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. Okay, so work culture is, the definition of work culture, the culture of a dental office, is sort of the unspoken shared values and behavioral norms of a group of people at a business. So a business culture. And so if we think of a policy manual, which has all the rules and this is what we do, the culture is the part that fills in that of those micro moments during the day where it doesn't say this in the policy, but maybe we have a culture of, and there's all kinds of different cultures. And so one culture might be, we just always, as a team, we always go above and beyond for patients or something like that. And so if that's part of the culture, then as a team, the owner or leader of the business or the dental practice in this case would try to build a team around who shares those values. It's tricky. And Wendy and I were saying, it's very, admittedly, dentists aren't naturally and necessarily good leaders or business managers. You don't learn that in dental school. And so you buy a dental practice or start a dental practice, that sort of thing. And that doesn't come with it, the idea of being this fantastic leader and fantastic manager and things like that. So there's a perfect world where a dentist or the owner of a dental practice or a dental hygiene clinic, if it's an independent hygiene clinic, but the owner of the business as the leader has to kind of do some brainstorming of thinking, well, what are my, as the owner and the future leader of this team or the current leader of this team, what are my values? What do I really, really care about? And so thinking about those and what the values are what infuse who is part of the team that fits those values. And when you get enough people on a team that share similar values, then you've got this culture. And so then when new people come on the team, then there's this, it's a sense, do I fit in? Does this feel like my work home? Do I feel like I belong here? Am I making intuitive decisions that go along with the way decisions are just normally made in this office? And so there's different types of people, and there's different people have different values, and there's different cultures. And so it's not as though you have to pick a specific or that one culture is better than the other. It's that the idea is to find a fit that is a good fit for you and a culture of a dental practice that makes it feel like when you're working there and you're working with the people that you feel like you're fitting in and that you belong. And so when that happens, then you know that this office has a good culture. It's a cultural fit for you. A certain person might be a fantastic cultural fit at one office because they have certain values and they operate a certain way. And that same person who fits in perfectly there could go to a different office that has a different culture and not be a great fit there because it just isn't a natural fit for values and the way of seeing the world and things like that. So, I'd love to say that everybody who owns a dental practice or a dental hygiene clinic is naturally great at leadership, where they're thinking of their values and coming up with a mission and a vision and values and defining and establishing a strong culture and things like that. But I think that's more often not the case, where it can happen by accident and by luck. But sometimes if there's not some leadership in place that is really shaping the culture and ensuring that everybody on the team is a fit for the culture, it ends up being sometimes a bit of a mishmash of just people working together. And it ends up being kind of a loose or non-existent culture. And in a worst case, if there's not intention behind it, it can degenerate into a toxic culture where there's backstabbing and people don't say what they mean and all of these other things. So the idea of having a good, healthy culture for the dental practice to me is very, very important. And I like to speak about those things, but I think that it's not as common as we wish it was in any business. I mean, it's not just dentistry, but there's all kinds of businesses out there that people work at that might not have a strong culture, or maybe not a cultural fit for a person who's working there. So did that answer it, Wendy? Is there anything else you want me to elaborate on for that?
No, I really like that how you kind of frame that, that what might be acceptable to one person won't be acceptable to the next person, or what somebody finds is the best practice in the world, someone else might not be a good fit for a variety of reasons.
The way I see it is, sort of is like if you imagine a brick wall or a stone wall, and a good culture means all of these stones are fitting very well together, and management and direction and all of that is that fills in the gaps. But if you have a kind of a weak culture, or the wrong type of culture that everybody is not necessarily a fit for on that team, the rocks don't fit that well together. So there's all kinds of micromanaging going on because the culture is not determining how people act in those micro moments that aren't defined by policies. So it just ends up being the situation where people are being micromanaged and told what to do all the time because the unspoken behavioral norms and the shared way of seeing the world isn't strongly established on that team type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for joining us so late in the evening. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no trouble. Happy to.
So, Jazz, you're better at monitoring the chat, and I've been trying to look, but I'm not that good at listening and reading at the same time. So,
hey, Wendy. Sorry, Afifa here. I have a ton of questions for you. I was just waiting for you to tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
All right,
so and we'll see if we can.
Yeah, we're going to go backwards a little bit here just to make sure everyone is heard. So the first question was, Sarah's wondering, is there data on education levels versus years of experience for salary, degree versus diploma versus master's, etc.?
There will be next year in the next survey. Yeah. We did it this year, but we needed to kind of expand the scope a little bit. Like, as you all know, the survey this year did look a little different from before. We're just trying to increase the amount of data we can take in without making the survey too difficult to fill out. And so, yeah, we kind of experimented a little bit this year, and then next year we should be able to give more information about education levels and how that correlates with age and wage and what kind of practice setting even. So, yeah.
All right.
Afifa, there might be some. There might be something. Don't quote me on this, but in the job market, the CDHA job market and employment survey, there might be some of that data.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be a source to go for people to go to.
Okay. So next question, from Dana: why is it that hygienists with 38 plus years of clinical dental hygiene are making the same as many new grads with minimal experience? She feels this needs to be addressed. I don't know if anyone has anything to comment on there.
You know what? Dental hygienists. Actually, James, why don't you take that one?
What do you think about that, James?
With the wage, you take the hard ones.
I can tell you, I'm not very good or knowledgeable about things like changing the system and policy change and organized dentistry and things like that. So my big thing and the things I speak about and the frame that I come from, the lens that I look at things through is, what can I as an individual do? So if I'm writing, say, for dental office owners or dental practice managers or dental hygiene clinic owners, there are all kinds of things about the world that we wish were different. But my thing is, what can the person in the mirror do tomorrow and the next day that can improve things? So I agree, that doesn't seem right. I just couldn't pretend to speak intelligently on what the solution is or that sort of thing. I'm very much about, from my perspective, you know, what can I as an individual do to change my situation, improve my situation, empower myself for my future and things like that. And so I know that's not a very fulfilling answer, but I just don't know if I could say anything intelligent about that other than I agree. I mean, it doesn't seem like somebody with that much experience should be making the same as a new grad who has no experience, who just graduated from school. It seems like there should be a correlation between years of experience and you know, an hourly rate up to a certain point, and then it will kind of level off, and then it kind of goes along with how many years at the office and all of those other things. But again, my thing is, and I would be happy to speak about, you know, as hygienists, as individuals, when you're at your dental office and you're seeing the hourly rates go up, how do we have those conversations? How do we preserve the relationship? How do I take a holistic view to my work life in a way that, yes, the hourly rate does matter. What are the other factors that are kind of associated with that? Is it a cultural fit? So all of those sorts of things, those are my wheelhouse of things I care about and that I really like to speak and write about, but I'm not very good at, I'm just not in organized dentistry. I'm not in the government. I'm not a, you know, of that role. So I just don't really, I would be worried that I would say something that just made no sense because it's not really my area of expertise, I guess.
Jazz, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, like just looking back at our slide of wage increases and how we saw that, here, I'm just going to hop back here, and how we saw that as years of experience went up, not getting a wage increase, you know, also went up. So why is that? Obviously we need to do more digging here. Is it because those hygienists might already be like maxed out? Like, is that an issue? Like, but that shouldn't be. There should be no like cap at how much a hygienist should be making if they're valuable and experienced. Or is it because a hygienist might, like James is talking about, like maybe they're just very comfortable with where they're working, and could that be a reason where they might not be receiving a wage increase or pursuing a wage increase? But I totally agree that I think that the more experience you have, the more you should be paid. And it's kind of like, as of like last year, we're finding that some hygienists are having to just leave their office and switch jobs to get paid what they're worth because the wages have gone up so like a significant amount, like we've discussed. But some employers might not be willing to pay that much. So it's worth some investigation, and logically, like any other job, it makes sense. If you have more experience, you should be getting paid more, especially more than someone who is maybe just starting out. So yeah,
I agree. Next question from Marcy. How do we get the dentist to accept our data info when the dentist loves to pull up their wage data that doesn't jive with our info?
That's a good question. So I would say that the biggest advantage our data set has is that it's catered to hygienists, first of all, and we have a 45% response rate for our membership. So almost 2,000 hygienists out of the 4,000 something we have in the province are responding to this survey. So it's a stronger sample size. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want, your association is your voice, right? So we're not going, as hygienists, we're not going to the BCDA and saying, hey, advocate for us. We're coming to the BCDHA, and this is one of the biggest things we do for our hygienists. So if you have any questions, you can always email us. If you like, we get emails all the time, like, how can I approach my employer with this information, or how can I present this? And we're super happy to help. And it's great to help someone and we hear back, oh yeah, thank you so much. This is what I ended up getting. And so we're always here for you. You can email us at practicesupport@bcdha.com or any BCDHA email really, and it'll get funneled to the right individual and we'll help you out.
All right. Let's see here. Hold on. We've got, okay, we already answered that one. Does anyone know the oral instruction fee? Carla didn't know there was a fee to charge. that's because most of us don't charge it. But yeah, Wendy, do you happen to know what the fee is?
I'd have to either get up and go to my closet or.
Okay, we have it
It's
somewhere.
email practice support and just ask us that question and we can get you that information because we do have access to the BCDHA. And that's a good point. You should have access to that. Part of informed consent when you're providing care, chair side to a patient, is helping the patient understand what the cost of services is. So your dentist, your employer, should have either an electronic or a hard copy of the fee guide, and you should have access to it. So just ask your employer and you can find that information there, or email us and we'll give it to you.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Wendy, oh no, you already answered that one. Or did you? Did you answer the question, Wendy, about when you were calculating your daily production numbers, were you including the exams and radiographs?
I mean, again, those
production.
numbers were just fictitious. It's not like they came from a dental hygienist. I was kind of just making up some numbers that, and I did verify those numbers with some hygienists in the province that they felt that that was a conservative number, what I was using.
Okay, this might be another practice support question. There was a question, how do you approach the new patient exam, which includes initial periodontal exam, dental charting if the production is given to the dentist? Hygienists in the office do all of the dental charting, periodontal exam, and treatment planning. But I guess it's not calculated under their name.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I would kind of, if you're trying to look at what part of that exam did I produce, I guess if you look at the time that it took you to do it and what was the time that the dentist spent. So let's assume some numbers. Let's assume it was a 30-minute it took to do that exam. Did the dentist spend 5 minutes doing the exam and you spent 25? Or did the dentist spend 20 and you spend 10? So I guess it just kind of depends on how you break that time up and who's basically doing most of the work, right?
Yeah, because I guess she means that maybe that won't be calculated in her production if she's trying to come up with the daily average to present to her employer, right?
Right. So it's not a black and white way to do things, right? For sure.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. I might have missed it. If a hygienist is on a percentage only compensation, what's the ballpark percentage that's fair? Her dentist has been talking about 35% of her billings.
I'm going to say I would not be able to say, yes, that's good, or no, that's not. Basically, because in my experience, I mean, there's been some practices that I've worked in. Literally, the dentist would go out and find a hot body, 2 feet and a heartbeat to put into my chair if I had a cancellation or a no-show. In those practices, I could probably take a lower percentage because I have a full chair every single day, all day, every day that I'm working. Some practices I've worked in, sometimes 3 or 4 patients don't show up in the day. So if you're getting paid a commission in that practice, that's going to make a huge difference if you're in a lower percentage with less patients. So again, some of that comes down to experience. What is the practice like? What is the patient flow like? What is the tolerance for no-shows, cancellations, that type of thing. So there's so many factors to factor into when you start getting paid on a commission basis that it's really not fair for us to just throw a number into the air and say, yeah, this would be fair and this wouldn't be fair.
That's what I had so far, Wendy.
Okay.
Great. And we just have a couple of things in the chat here. One question, the average wage doesn't match. I know I'm getting 56 up to 60 an hour. Yeah, so like the average is the average. For every person that's getting 60, there might be someone getting 40, right? So that's why that slide I showed you with the middle 50% and the top 25% and the bottom 25%, that's the range. So yeah, I mean, I know of people getting really good wages, and we were actually pretty shocked at some of the wages we saw in the survey. We're like, okay, someone is out in this place making this many dollars an hour, and so they totally need a raise if they're a dental hygienist doing dental hygiene work. So yeah, wages range, so, which is why we're happy that we have a sample size here of 1,840 something hygienists, because that just tells us that our average is going to be much more applicable, I guess. But yeah, definitely there are more people getting more and also people getting less. So yeah. And just scrolling through, that's it, I think.
Okay.
Wendy, do you?
Yeah.
I was just thinking if it's helpful when you were showing me those points on that one slide about that summary of the dentist, the owners can't leave and that sort of thing. I've got some thought, like I don't want to interrupt or if there's other things to be said or other questions, but I had some thoughts on those points. If it'd be helpful, I'd be happy to speak about them. But again, I don't want to jump in if there's other questions or anything like that.
You know what, I'm just going to say that I know it's 8:15. We did indicate that we could go to 8:30, but I know that some people need permission to leave. So if you have to go, we really enjoyed having you come and listen to us rattle on about data and numbers and stuff like that. We hope it was helpful. And if you want to hang around for a few more minutes and hear what James has to say, you're more than welcome. If not, we'll see you later, and we will email out our PowerPoint slides to everybody that attended tonight. So thanks very much. So go ahead, James. I love hearing you speak. You're very articulate, and you make so much sense when you talk about this stuff.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. So let me I'll try to make it brief and go through because I have some thoughts on each of those kinds of points. So 100% communication is key, really critical. But what fuels good communication is a good mindset. And so I just want to kind of flavor that a little bit because when when you were saying you want to be armed with this data, I think that you have to be cautious about a mindset of saying, time the conversation at this time so that this thing happens. You don't want to necessarily have a mindset of going in to do battle of I win or lose, or this is victory or defeat sort of thing. You have to go in with a mindset of this might be a process. There might be a conversation to be had. And so to spring it on, say, the dentist and say, well, I timed it at this time. It wasn't the end of the day we had this talk. It may or may not happen at that time because, again, we have to go back to, well, every dentist is different. So we can't necessarily lump every dentist together and say, this is how it will go. There's some that have a better handle on management and leadership and some that don't. And knowing many, many dentists, a lot of us are natural introverts and things like that. And so starting that conversation might end up getting the dentist worked up a little bit and stressed out and things like that. And so you kind of have to maybe think of it, at least it might go on to a few different conversations. So to broach the topic and say, I noticed the hourly rates are going up. Do you think we can schedule some time to have a conversation about that? And then maybe the next conversation is, well, this is kind of where we are. And I should mention that second podcast that I did on A Tale of Two Hygienists kind of summarizes this. So if you do want to check it out, the podcast is called A Tale of Two Hygienists. And there's a thing called a tip-episode that I did on it. But think of it as a little bit of a process because you want to know from the dentist side too, what do they value the most? Do they value really friendly enthusiasm and pitching in and offering to help and just being a really enthusiastic, friendly part of the team? Or do they more favor just, top-notch clinical care where every little spicule of calculus has to be scaled off and no overlap in the bite wings or things like that? So that's a nice way to open up the conversation because if you're looking for higher hourly rates and to get a raise, and especially hourly rates are going up and a lot of people are in a position to be asking for a higher hourly rate. That's just the fact of the way the job market is going and historically. So it's, I'm not saying shy away from that, but you want to kind of go into it with the thought that it might end up being a little bit of a process because then the dentist might say, well, you know what, those last 4 times it was tartar all over these teeth. And you say, okay, well, these are some things that I need to work on to kind of bolster the argument for a higher hourly rate. But I would just caution against the mindset of I'm armed with this thing. I've rehearsed this thing. I'm going to go in and I'm going to win or lose because just be prepared to have an open conversation and maybe a couple of conversations about it. And again, it all depends on how you feel about that office, that team. Is this your work home? Is it a toxic environment? Is it a situation where you say, look, I want $10 more an hour to work at this place because I don't really like it anyways. And so you can kind of go in and knowing that you have options for maybe other positions that you could apply for that might feel more like your work home. But I guess that would just be one thing. Is go in with a mindset of it's a conversation to be had. You'll have facts on your side and numbers on your side and things like that, but try not to go in as though you feel as though you're armed for battle, but more that you're having a conversation about the situation and seeing how you can resolve it. Because you want to, there's a situation where a dentist might be in a tight spot, or any business owner might be in a tight spot where they think, oh, this person's asking for more money and I can't afford to lose anybody because hygienists are really hard to find these days. And so now they're in a tight spot, so they agree to it. So again, avoiding the battle mentality, but if you think, oh, I won that one, there's a possibility that you set yourself up for some animosity down the road as well. And so you want to make sure that if this is a place that you care about and you feel like you belong there, that you think of the holistic view of your work life, take the hourly rate into consideration for sure. Don't shy away from asking a higher hourly rate, but think of it more as a process and a conversation to be had instead of a battle to be won or lost. And so, and with that mindset, it will infuse the style of communication that you're going to approach it with. Because now you're kind of saying, do you think we can set up a time for this? And these are the numbers that I've, this is what my production has been, and this is my hourly rate, and this is what the industry is showing, and these are all going up, and this person's a new grad and they're earning this much and that sort of thing. And have it professional, have it respectful, give the opportunity for change. If you don't see the change that you're looking for in your work situation, the other message right now is feel empowered, because there's a lot of opportunities at dental offices that treat hygienists with professional respect, great work-life balance, great work environments, and that sort of thing. So you don't necessarily have to feel stuck where you are if you feel like you're not being treated with respect as a professional, and again, market hourly rates and that sort of thing. So that would be the approach in terms of communication. That slide about how owners can't leave, it just basically, my point about that was, no matter, even if it's the owner's complete fault, the owners, they don't leave. So it just ends up being the person who's working there ends up leaving, even if it can be 100% the fault of the owner, the dentist, the dental hygienist who owns the clinic, anything like that. A business owner, they can't, even if they're at fault, they end up not being the one who leaves. It ends up being you or the employee that leaves, kind of thing. Work culture, we kind of talked about. Rehearsing your script for sure, but again, you want to caution yourself against, and I always use this analogy of baking bread. And so you think, okay, I've rehearsed this, I've got this dough, I've put it in the oven, I've got all my facts, and now I've got this bread, and now I'm going to take this bread and it's baked and I hope this wins, kind of thing. But think of it more like dough. Think of it more like this, if you rehearse it down to the T, you want to get your points across and you want to be articulate about it and professional about it. But I would say don't invest a win or lose attitude even in rehearsing your script, but just this is the way I'd want to approach it, and be open to a back and forth dialogue about it. But again, that sense of feeling empowered, because there's a lot of good offices looking to hire people. So you have that in your pocket, but start it off with a professional conversation, good communication, express your concerns, listen to the concerns of the dental office as well, or the manager, the owner, that sort of thing, or the dental hygiene clinic owner. Listen to them, because part of communication is good listening. And so if they have feedback for you or anything like that, take it to heart and say, okay, well, is this something I can work with to improve this situation? Or is it something that I have to look for another job, or that sort of thing? And that kind of ties in with that, including the employer in your overall work appraisal. So it is about having that dialogue, that saying, okay, well, here's what my hourly rate is, here's what the market hourly rate is, and what's the path here? And maybe it is a increased blend of, and sometimes there's a percentage of, it's hygiene production plus a base hourly rate or things like that. But maybe there's a way to work in where you're getting compensated more for your production based and relative to the production of that hygiene operatory and your time there. But again, as Wendy said, you have to consider the schedule and things like that. But I know a lot of offices are sort of starting with an hourly rate, but then the percentage on top of production and things like that. Which then does tie back to that self-reflection about, and I kind of mentioned this in that podcast too, where everybody, us, we as individuals, everybody there, we spend money on things that we value. And so when you're having that conversation with the business owner, you want to find out, well, what do they value? And am I contributing to that value? Because part of it will boil down to, and I'll say as an aside, I've owned 2 dental practices. Right now, I don't own a dental practice. I work out of a mental health hospital 1 day a week, and the rest of the time I run Tempstars. So I'm still a clinical dentist. I have many, many years experience owning 2 different dental practices. I started one from scratch, and then I bought another practice and that sort of thing. So I'm familiar with that and the mindset of dentists and things like that. And I myself have gone through a journey of being a terrible manager and a terrible leader, but found it incumbent upon myself to become good at it. And so, but I get the mindset of the dentist or dental hygienist or business owners who might be somewhere in that journey. So anyways, if you're asking for a higher hourly rate, I can tell you some dentists will think, well, what's the opportunity cost? I mean, if this person leaves, then will I be able to find somebody of value for the office and the patients and things like that? Because the truth too is that sometimes things go unspoken. And again, dentists are not naturally necessarily good managers and leaders. So there's often, depending on the culture, there's a lot of unspoken things. And so it's possible the owner is thinking, I kind of hope that person asks for a raise, and because then I won't give it to them and then they'll quit. So that exists too in the workplace. That's not a healthy situation, but again, opening up that dialogue so that you can say, okay, what is of value to this practice? If I like it here and I value this culture and I value the team and I feel like I belong here, what can I do that will raise that hourly rate and provide more value? But no business owner right now can get away from the fact that the cost of living is going up. Hourly rates are all going up in every industry. Dentistry is no different. So you're in a good position to have those conversations. But I guess what I'm trying to get across is, yes, you can have those conversations, but you want to set yourself up for success and good relationships in that office after those conversations. And you want it to be as minimal stressful as possible as well. Because you can just try not to think of it as a battle and think, how can I have these conversations? How can I get the thing that I'm kind of going after, but still want to work at this place and still preserve the relationships and the good feelings and the part of the team going forward afterwards? And so there's some nuance to that. There's the communication and the mindset that can kind of really help foster that and preserve those feelings. And again, it depends how you feel about that office. If you don't really like that office and everybody's, or you feel like this isn't your work home, you might approach it differently. But if you've got an office where you feel appreciated, you're treated with respect as an individual, and really the crux of the issue is that hourly rates have gone up, you haven't had a raise in 10 years, and now you want to ask for a raise, well, there's a way to approach it in a way that kind of softens things, gets you what you want, but still preserves the relationship and conveys to the owner that you really do like working there, that you value the relationship, that you value the patients, that you really feel connected to the team. But the reality is that our hourly rates are going up, and this is kind of what the range that you're looking for is and that sort of thing. So yeah, that was just the points that I was thinking as I was looking at those slides, Wendy.
James, thank you very much. Well, I certainly hope that we provided you with some information that's been helpful and that helps you feel empowered and helps you feel that you can do what's best for you in your practice setting. And hopefully you feel okay with reaching out to Jazz, Shannon, myself, or any of the BCDHA team to assist you in that process. I know there's probably still some questions. I still see some stuff about billing issues. Practice advisors can help you with that too. For those people that had questions about the fee guide and fees, please email us. We can pull that information up if you don't have access to it. And any parting words there, Jazz? You want to send everybody off?
I just want to let everybody know that April 26th, actually, I'm going to share my screen here. We have a webinar with Leah Moody, the BCDHA lawyer. So make sure you guys come and listen to her. She's awesome. She's super knowledgeable. I'm just sharing my screen here, one sec. And it'll be really good for everyone to kind of, things have changed since the last time she came and did a webinar with us. So it'll be good for everybody to kind of hop in and see what she has to say and see how things have changed with like the new sick day rule, for example. So yeah, so April 26th at 6 p.m. we'll be with Leah. And thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, there's our email, practice support. If you have any employment questions, or if you're not sure who to email, just email us at info and we'll filter accordingly. So thank you everybody for attending, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah,
thanks
for having me, everyone.
And thank you, James. Yeah.
And everybody else that was online. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.